July 8, 1944. Northern Saipan, Mariana Islands. Dawn was breaking over a battlefield littered with the bodies of 4,311 Japanese soldiers who had died in the largest banzai charge of the Pacific War just hours earlier. In volcanic caves scattered across the island's northern cliffs, survivors of the failed assault huddled in darkness, wounded, demoralized, and waiting for death. Then came a sound that would change everything: not gunfire, not explosions, but a human voice speaking perfect Japanese through American loudspeakers. Private First Class Teruo Nakamura pressed deeper into his cave, hands covering his ears, trying to block out words that challenged everything he believed about honor, duty, and death. The voice belonged to Sergeant Koji Yamada of the 136th Infantry Regiment, captured days earlier during the American advance. Now Yamada described clean beds, medical treatment, and regular meals in American custody. According to everything Nakamura had been taught, this was impossible. Captured Japanese soldiers were supposed to be tortured and killed. Yet here was Yamada's unmistakable voice, speaking freely, urging his comrades to choose life over death. This was not a conventional weapon. It was a sound bomb that struck at minds rather than bodies, dissolving certainties that had driven men to choose death, transforming convictions that had sustained Japanese resistance. The American psychological warfare campaign on Saipan would revolutionize combat in the Pacific, proving that truth could shatter morale more effectively than bombs, that voices could save more lives than bullets. The campaign had begun on June 15, 1944, when American forces launched Operation Forager. Among the 71,000 troops were Japanese language officers whose mission would prove as vital as any combat unit. They carried thousands of leaflets printed by the Honolulu Advertiser containing something revolutionary: detailed instructions in Japanese on how to surrender safely. Lieutenant Robert Sheeks, a Marine intelligence officer who had witnessed the fanatical resistance at Tarawa, where only 17 Japanese soldiers out of 5,000 had surrendered, understood a crucial fact. The concept of surrender had been systematically removed from Japanese military training. Death was presented as the only honorable option when facing defeat. Private Kenji Watanabe found one of these leaflets on June 18th, blown into his position near Mount Tapachau. He quickly hid it, knowing possession meant execution. The leaflet showed a Japanese soldier walking toward American lines with hands raised. Below were instructions that seemed almost insultingly simple, yet revolutionary for soldiers never taught surrender was possible. Remove weapons. Hold white cloth or leaflet overhead. Walk slowly toward American positions during daylight. Call out, "I cease resistance." Paper promises alone couldn't overcome years of indoctrination. What followed transformed those promises into psychological reality. On June 20th, American loudspeakers began broadcasting messages that would systematically dismantle Japanese military doctrine. The Office of War Information had established forward bases with printing presses, radio transmitters, and Nisei interpreters who understood not just language but cultural psychology. The innovation that made this possible came from Sheeks himself. Using diverted recreation funds, he mounted loudspeakers on jeeps, creating mobile psychological warfare units. The 2nd Marine Division motor pool assembled gasoline-powered generators with snorkel exhaust extensions. Engineers developed systems projecting clear sound over a mile, waterproof speakers for naval vessels, portable units for frontline operations. The broadcasts followed carefully orchestrated patterns. Morning transmissions featured captured officers reading Japanese newspapers obtained through neutral sources, proving American intelligence had current information about Japan. Afternoon broadcasts contained personal messages from captured soldiers using nicknames and memories only genuine unit members would know. Evening broadcasts played Japanese music between descriptions of prisoner treatment, deliberately contrasting with defenders starving in caves. Sergeant Yamada's June 20th broadcast contained details impossible to fake. "I am in an American hospital. My wounds are cleaned and bandaged. I have eaten rice and fish. The Americans have not tortured me. What we were told was false." Lieutenant Colonel Takashi Hirakawa immediately ordered execution for anyone listening to American broadcasts, but the orders proved unenforceable. Voices came unexpectedly from multiple directions, penetrating caves where defenders huddled. Japanese soldiers taught Americans were demons heard comrades describing medical treatment and regular meals. Master Sergeant Thomas Sakamoto, a Nisei translator, worked 18-hour days preparing scripts. He recalled discovering a captured diary. "The voices torment us day and night. We cannot escape them. They tell us things that cannot be true, yet we recognize the voices. Everything we believed is becoming uncertain." On June 28th, 17 Japanese soldiers led by Corporal Masao Sato surrendered after listening to their captured commander. Sato later described, "Captain Yoshida mentioned things only we could know. He said, 'The Emperor wants you to live. Japan needs living soldiers to rebuild, not dead heroes accomplishing nothing.' We looked at each other in our cave and knew the war was over for us." Each surrender created cascading effects. New prisoners immediately recorded messages, each voice adding to the chorus contradicting Japanese military teaching. Teams learned to exploit military culture, tailoring messages by rank youth and families for enlisted men, responsibility for officers. Private First Class William Chen developed a particularly effective technique, broadcasting cooking sounds while describing meals. "We could hear them crying in their caves," Chen recalled. "Hunger combined with knowledge their comrades were eating broke resistance better than threats." The 30,000 civilians on Saipan presented unique challenges. Japanese authorities had spread propaganda claiming Americans would commit atrocities. Female Nisei soldiers recorded messages for women and children. Mrs. Kimiko Tanaka, who surrendered June 25th, broadcast repeatedly, "I surrendered with my children. We were terrified. But Americans gave us water immediately. A doctor treated my sick daughter. We're safe with other families. For your children's sake, choose life." Haruko Yamamoto, a Japanese settler, later testified, "My husband wanted us to jump from the cliffs, but then we heard Mrs. Tanaka's voice on the speakers. She was my neighbor. She said her children were safe, playing with toys. I grabbed my baby and ran toward the American lines. The speakers gave me courage to defy my husband and choose life." These broadcasts unexpectedly affected military personnel. Soldiers willing to die themselves broke hearing Japanese children crying, families torn apart by suicide orders. Lieutenant James Patterson noted, "The sound of children was our most powerful weapon. Hardened soldiers broke down hearing Japanese children laughing in our camps. Japanese military instituted harsh countermeasures, summary executions, confiscating white cloth, suicidal attacks on loudspeakers. Captain Robert Miller witnessed one July 2nd attack. They came at our speaker in daylight, completely exposed. We cut them down, but they kept coming just to destroy one loudspeaker. That showed how much broadcasts affected them." The culmination came after July 7th's banzai charge. General Yoshitsugu Saito had gathered almost 4,300 Japanese soldiers, walking wounded and some civilians, many unarmed, and ordered the charge. After 15 hours of combat, 4,311 Japanese troops were dead. American casualties numbered 406 killed and 512 wounded from the 105th Infantry alone. Lieutenant Masashi Ito wrote in his recovered diary, July 9th, "The speakers never stop. I recognize Lieutenant Suzuki's voice from 3rd Company. He describes hot baths, medical care. My men look at me with questions in their eyes. How can I tell them to die when their comrades live? My certainty wavers like a candle in wind." In the aftermath, psychological warfare teams broadcast continuously for 48 hours, describing the attack's futility, urging survivors to avoid similar sacrifice. The broadcasts reached caves where survivors huddled, many wounded, all demoralized by the failure of their final assault. On July 8th, in this context of shattered morale, Private First Class Guy Gabaldon achieved the war's most remarkable individual surrender. The 18-year-old Marine, speaking Japanese learned from his Japanese-American foster family, convinced approximately 800 Japanese soldiers and civilians to surrender in a single day. While operating independently from formal psychological warfare units, Gabaldon's success demonstrated the same principle. Given genuine alternatives to death, many Japanese would choose life. By early July, results were remarkable. The campaign resulted in 11,409 prisoners of war. This exceeded all estimates. More significantly, many provided valuable intelligence, unthinkable earlier in the war when Japanese soldiers typically refused cooperation even after capture. Success transformed American doctrine. Admiral Nimitz ordered expansion of psychological warfare units and establishment of a permanent center on Saipan for operations against Japan. The center, established August 1944, included printing facilities producing millions of leaflets weekly, radio equipment reaching Japan, and training facilities. Japanese prisoners who volunteered helped develop materials and recorded broadcasts. Sergeant Yoshio Nakamura explained his participation. "I saw hundreds of American planes daily heading for Japan, endless ships arriving with supplies. I knew Japan couldn't win. By broadcasting truth about American strength and prisoner treatment, I hoped to save lives, shorten the war. Some called me traitor. I believed I was saving Japanese lives. Saipan's loss had greater impact in Japan than any previous defeat. When news of surrenders reached Japan, though censored, it cracked home front morale. The government had insisted their soldiers never surrendered. Saipan's evidence undermined this narrative. More importantly, Saipan brought Japan within range of American propaganda. B-29 bombers could reach the home islands with leaflets. Radio transmissions could be heard clearly in Japan. The first major operation began November 1944, with bombers dropping millions of leaflets warning of bombing raids, providing specific information about coming attacks to build credibility. Captain Ellis Zacharias began broadcasts from Saipan in May 1945. Speaking fluent Japanese with intimate knowledge of Japanese culture, Zacharias addressed leaders directly, offering face-saving ways to end the war. His broadcasts were carried on the Saipan transmitter once weekly on Radio Tokyo's frequency, ensuring they couldn't be censored. His August 4th broadcast, days before Hiroshima, warned of weapons with unprecedented destructive power. Broadcasts targeted specific units on other islands. Iwo Jima defenders heard voices of comrades captured on Saipan describing resistance's futility. Philippine defenders received broadcasts including information about their Japanese hometowns, demonstrating that resistance on isolated islands wouldn't protect families from bombing. Technical sophistication continued evolving. By early 1945, teams produced Japanese-language newspapers dropped over enemy territories. Printed on captured Japanese presses using Japanese typefaces, these looked authentic, containing real news from Japan mixed with propaganda. The newspapers were so convincing that Japanese commands issued warnings about fakes, inadvertently confirming authenticity. Refugee camps became unexpected psychological warfare assets. Films and photographs of Japanese civilians living peacefully under American administration contradicted everything Japanese soldiers had been told. These images, dropped as leaflets over other islands, proved powerful weapons against Japanese propaganda. The campaign pioneered black propaganda materials appearing to originate from Japanese sources. False military orders, counterfeit government pronouncements, and fake letters from senior officers sowed confusion and distrust. Fake Japanese military newspapers, perfect replicas, contained subtle defeatist messages mixed with genuine news. Japanese prisoners participating underwent profound transformations. Expected to be executed or tortured, they instead received Geneva Convention treatment. Lieutenant Hiroshi Tanaka, captured July 1944, described his transformation. When captured, I expected death. But Americans treated me as human. They were interested in my knowledge. When I agreed to make broadcasts, it wasn't coercion. I realized everything I'd been taught was based on lies. Private Kenji Sato, captured after the banzai charge, wrote to his family after repatriation. The Americans gave me medical treatment for my wounds. They fed me 3 times daily. When I agreed to speak on their broadcasts, it was because I wanted to save my comrades from meaningless death. In their camps, I learned that our enemies were more honorable than our leaders. The operations impacted American forces too. Marines and soldiers witnessing large-scale Japanese surrenders began seeing enemies differently. The image of the fanatical Japanese soldier was replaced by understanding of humans trapped by ideology. This influenced occupation policies, contributing to successful transformation of Japanese society. By March 1945, the center operated at full capacity. Multiple transmitters broadcast continuously to Japan. Printing presses ran 24 hours producing leaflets. Interpreters and analysts processed intelligence developing new materials. Former Japanese military worked alongside Americans creating resonant messages. Preparation for Okinawa's invasion saw capabilities deployed unprecedentedly. Millions of leaflets warned civilians, providing instructions for avoiding combat. Radio broadcasts in Okinawan dialect addressed local concerns. Despite Japanese pressure for mass suicide, many civilians surrendered using techniques refined on Saipan. These technical breakthroughs in communication would have implications far beyond the battlefield, shaping both military doctrine and the human relationships that would define the post-war era. While psychological warfare continued its systematic erosion of Japanese resistance through spring 1945, a new and terrible chapter was about to begin. The atomic bombings represented the ultimate psychological weapon, demonstrating American technological superiority starkly. But these were preceded and followed by operations from Saipan. Leaflets warned of unprecedented destruction. After Hiroshima, materials from Saipan described atomic power, urging surrender to avoid further devastation. Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945, was announced to isolated forces through Saipan broadcasts. Many Japanese soldiers first learned of surrender from American psychological warfare broadcasts. Credibility established through months of accurate information made broadcasts believable even to skeptics. Several island commanders requested confirmation through Saipan's station, trusting it more than damaged Japanese communications. The center continued operating after surrender, convincing holdouts the war was truly over. Captain Sake Oba, who led 46 men in guerrilla actions following Saipan's battle, surrendered December 1, 1945, 3 months after war's end. Patient broadcasts featuring Japanese officers reading the imperial rescript eventually convinced most holdouts. The legacy extended beyond World War II. Techniques developed integrating intelligence and propaganda, using enemy personnel, cultural understanding. Truth as weapon became fundamental to military doctrine. Fort Bragg's Psychological Warfare Center incorporated Saipan lessons into training. Veterans went on to influential careers in intelligence, diplomacy, academia. Nisei interpreters became bridges between America and post-war Japan. Japanese prisoners who participated became democracy advocates in post-war Japan. Dr. Robert Sheeks spent his post-war career studying conflict's psychological dimensions. In 1975, he reflected, "We discovered on Saipan that the human voice, speaking truth to people trapped by lies, was more powerful than any bomb. We didn't just defeat the Japanese military, we defeated beliefs driving men to choose death over life." Private Teruo Nakamura's transformation exemplified the campaign's power. After hiding in caves trying to block American broadcasts in July 1944, he surrendered in August after weeks of internal struggle. He assisted American forces making broadcasts, helping save lives. After the war, he became a teacher in Japan. In 1985 memoirs he wrote, "The voice from the speaker didn't wound the body but wounded something deeper, certainties making resistance possible. When those crumbled, when we couldn't believe death was the only honorable choice, the war ended. Not with death's silence, but with human voices offering another way." Staff Sergeant Roy Matsumoto recalled emotional complexity. "I spoke to Japanese soldiers in my parents' language, urging surrender to the country that imprisoned my family in internment camps. Yet I believed in what I was doing. I was saving lives, American and Japanese. Every soldier who surrendered because of our broadcasts was a victory for humanity." The campaign influenced post-war reconstruction in Japan. Understanding of Japanese psychology gained informed occupation policies and democratization efforts. Japanese prisoners who participated often became bridges between occupiers and society, translating not just language but cultural concepts and democratic ideals. At the 1994 reunion, American psychological warfare veterans met Japanese soldiers who surrendered on Saipan. Corporal Akira Yamamoto, who had described the broadcast's torment, shook hands with Lieutenant Robert Patterson, who directed operations. "Your voices saved my life," Yamamoto said. "They gave permission to live when culture demanded death." Lessons continue resonating in contemporary operations. Cultural understanding's importance, targeted messaging's power, truth's value over deception, and psychological operations' potential to reduce casualties remain relevant. Modern operations, though employing different technologies, follow many principles established on Saipan. The ethical framework developed, prioritizing truth and humanitarian concern even in psychological warfare, influenced international laws regarding propaganda and psychological operations. The campaign demonstrated inter-service and interagency cooperation's importance. Recognition that modern warfare required not just military force but psychological, cultural, and information operations became embedded in doctrine. As dawn broke on August 15, 1945, the last transmission from Saipan's Psychological Warfare Center to Japanese forces still fighting carried news of the Emperor's surrender broadcast. Voices beginning with simple surrender instructions in June 1944 ended with words bringing peace. "The war is over. You can go home. You have survived." For thousands who might have died in futile resistance, these words from speakers once seeming like torment weapons became life promises. The transformation was complete. The American campaign beginning on Saipan achieved what military force alone never could. It defeated not just Japanese military resistance, but transformed the psychological landscape, making such resistance possible. Voices from speakers, words on leaflets, truths contradicting lies created new reality where surrender wasn't dishonor but wisdom, where choosing life wasn't cowardice but courage. Lieutenant Robert Sheeks, reflecting decades later, captured what was achieved. We discovered the most powerful weapon in war isn't one destroying the enemy's body, but one changing his mind. On Saipan, we learned to wage war on ideas, beliefs, myths driving men to die needlessly. We learned a voice speaking truth can be more powerful than 1,000 bombs. We learned even in brutal conflict's midst, there's space for humanity, communication, transformation possibility. The Saipan psychological warfare campaign stands as a watershed moment in modern conflict history. It demonstrated wars are won not just on battlefields but in combatants' minds. It proved understanding enemy psychology and culture could be as important as understanding military capabilities. It showed truth, properly delivered, could be war's most powerful weapon. Most importantly, it revealed enemies locked in mortal combat could be reached by appeals to common humanity. The voices echoing across Saipan's volcanic landscape in 1944 carried more than words. They carried survival possibility for those taught to die, hope for those trapped in despair, truth for those imprisoned by lies. They were indeed sound bombs, weapons shattering not bodies but beliefs, destroying not cities but certainties, conquering not through force but through reality's irresistible power breaking through illusion. Their legacy continues echoing through history, reminding that in war's devastation midst, human ingenuity can find ways to save rather than destroy lives, build rather than burn bridges, transform enemies into future friends. The American sound bombs shattering Japanese morale on Saipan without firing a shot remain one of warfare's most remarkable and humane innovations, proof that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't one speaking loudest, but one speaking truth.